Let me carry your cross for Ireland, Lord. The hour of her trial draws near, and the pangs and the pains of the sacrifice may be borne by comrades dear. But Lord, take me from the offering throng. There are many far less prepared, though anxious and all as they are to die, that Ireland may be spared. Let me carry your cross for Ireland, Lord. My cares in this world are few, and few are the tears that will for me fall when I go on my way to you. Spare, oh spare to their loved ones dear, the brother and son and sire, that the cause we love may never die in the land of our heart's desire. Let me carry your cross for Ireland, Lord. Let me suffer the pain and shame. I bow my head to the rage and hate, and I take on myself the blame. Let them do with my body what ear they will. My spirit I offer to you, that the faithful few who heard her call may be spared to Roisin Dove. Let me carry your cross for Ireland, Lord, for Ireland weak with tears, for the aged man of the clouded brow and the child of tender years, for the empty homes of her golden plains and the hopes of her future too. Let me carry your cross for Ireland, Lord, for the cause of Roisin Dove.
Thomas Ashe was born in Kinnaird, County Kerry on the 12th of January 1885. From an early age, he was a member of the Irish Republican Brotherhood, a militant member of the Gaelic League and a founding member of the Irish Volunteers. He was appointed principal teacher of Carduff National School, North County, Dublin in 1908, at the remarkably young age of 23, a position he held until the Easter Rising of 1916.
While in Carduff School, he was very active in Gaelic and Irish sporting organisations. He founded the award-winning Black Raven Pipe Band in Lusk and was a founding member of the Round Towers Gaelic Football and Hurling Club in 1906.
In 1916, he was appointed as Commandant of the 5th Battalion of the Irish Volunteers and played a leading role in the fighting in Fingal and in particular at the Battle of Ashburn during the Easter Rebellion. After the Rising, Thomas Ashe was arrested for his activities, court-martialled and sentenced to death along with Eamon de Valera. The sentence was later commuted to penal servitude for life.
Thomas Ashe was rearrested in August 1917 and accused of sedition on foot of a speech that the authorities claimed was seditious. While in Mountjoy, he objected to the prison conditions and went on hunger strike. On Tuesday night, September 25th, 1917, only 14 days into his prison sentence, Thomas Ashe died in the Mater Hospital. On 2 days after his death, an inquest was opened to examine the circumstances surrounding his death. The evidence lasted for 11 days.
The City Coroner, Dr. Lewis A. Byrne, presided over the inquest. Henry Hanna appeared for the Crown. He was a lawyer of distinction who later became a High Court judge. Timothy Michael Healy appeared for Ashe's next of kin. He was an experienced politician, a former member of Parnell's Nationalist Party, who was well known for his formidable learning and experience in his legal profession. Tensions were running high following Ashe's death, and this inquest would do little to change that. The very first exchanges were to cast doubt on the basic motives of the authorities.
I appear on behalf of the relatives of Thomas Ashe. Before we begin this inquest, I wish to question the composition of the jury. It appears we only have 16 men. To my understanding, the jury are entitled to have this inquest conducted by a 23-man jury. All I have to do is look at their names to see that most of them are Tories.
Mr. Hilly, the normal procedure has been followed in choosing the jury. There must be at least 12 jurors and no more than 23. I instructed the police to summon me 23 men, and of them, these 16 were in attendance this morning.
That is unacceptable. I do not wish to proceed until we have 23 jurors.
Does anyone else wish to speak before I rule on this matter?
Mr. Coroner, I appear on behalf of the prison authorities, and I have no problem in proceeding with the list of 16 men before me.
Thank you, gentlemen. I propose to proceed with the present list of jurors, if it fulfills the legal requirements laid down, as both their learned friends realise.
Thank you, Mr. Coroner. We have been investigating the death of a very unusual man. A death so tragic and a man so remarkable that, as we know, his coffin was followed by 100,000 people. No words of mine are needed to stress the importance of this inquest or of your verdict. Throughout, the prison authorities have not uttered one word of regret for the conduct of those who brought Thomas Ashe to his grave. In fact, their attitude could be summed up by a phrase Mr. Hannah used when he said, "If he felt the cold, he only has himself to blame for it." What is the prison authorities' case? They say that the deceased was the architect of his own misfortune, that he was treated with absolute legality in the prison, and that everything flowed from his own misconduct, from his own lawlessness, and from his breach of the prison rules. That case, which my learned friend, Mr. Hannah, has presented, is, I say now without apology, as false as hell itself. There is not one word, one shadow or tittle of foundation in it. That case is being deliberately and disgracefully concocted by the prison board to escape the guilt of the willful murder which lies at their door. What really happened? Thomas Ashe started his sentence on September 11th. Immediately, he refused to work or obey prison rules. On September 17th, the charge of refusing to work was put to him, which he did not deny. He was punished by being deprived of books and losing remission on his sentence. From then until the day he died, no other punishment, according to the Deputy Governor, was ever inflicted on him. Yet, the Lord Mayor of Dublin has told us that he found Thomas Ashe having lain in a naked cell for 2 days and 2 nights without bed, bedding, and boots, and racked from want of sleep. Do you know what Thomas Ashe said to the Lord Mayor? I'll tell you. He said simply, "I don't know what I have done to deserve this treatment." Ashe had been found guilty of an offence and was being punished for it. But this was in addition to that. This was illegal and unrecorded. They had been caught in the act. Whoever was responsible had to make up an excuse for it. And then they put the cart before the horse. They invented the story of the smashing of the glass and of the furniture, of the pandemonium, and of the Deputy Governor driven to interfere, and all after the prisoners had committed illegalities and commenced a hunger strike, as it was stated, without provocation. At this stage, there was no thought of a hunger strike. True, the prisoners had planned a hunger strike for October 1st if their demands for a different status were not met. But this was September 20th, 11 days earlier, when the cells were stripped. This order from the prison board is what sparked off the hunger strike then and there. That order from Mr. Max Green, the chairman of the prison board, is what brought Thomas Ashe to his grave. Mr. Boland may have carried out the instructions, but Mr. Green gave the order. He broke the law. If it were not for the intervention of the Lord Mayor, we could have 40 corpses in Mountjoy Prison instead of 1. Green's strategy was simple, not to concede with the demands of the prisoners, but instead to gamble his cruelties against their courage. Mr. Green thought he could break Ashe's spirit, but he only succeeded in breaking his heart. I strongly object to the attitude which the prison authorities have adopted in this whole inquest. The jury are entitled to the fullest information of this case, not partial information, not partisan information, nor political information. At the beginning of this inquest, the only people who knew all the facts surrounding the death of Thomas Ashe were the prison authorities and officials. We would have expected honesty or some sign of regret from them in this tragic affair. So, what did we get? As soon as they thought we were getting uncomfortably near the truth, they threw their shield of privilege around them. It was like an iron shutter on what was going on in Mountjoy Prison in Dublin Castle. What is this privilege? The privilege to conceal responsibility. The privilege to hide the guilty. I would submit that the invention of the doctrine of privilege in matters of life and death, such as these, cannot and should not exist. At this stage, despite the authorities' efforts, nobody can be in any doubt as to the degrading treatment Mr. Ashe was subjected to before and during his hunger strike. I see no point in going into these terrible details again. What have they achieved in Dublin Castle? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The prisoner's original demands are now conceded in full. Thomas Ashe is dead. Other nations will read about it in times to come. They will be heartened by the story of this humble, uncomplaining schoolmaster who stood up against tyranny. But it is for you, the jury, here and now, to appraise the blame as to how this man met his untimely end. It is for you to so frame your verdict that people may know that this death was no suicide. Thomas Ashe loved life, and that life was brutally taken away from him. If you find in accordance with these facts, then his death will not have been a complete waste. Others have tried to avoid their responsibilities. I trust you will not avoid yours. I leave that in your hands, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. I call on Mr. Hannah to sum up on behalf of the prison authorities.
Thank you, Mr. Coroner. At the outset, I must object to Mr. Healy's conduct throughout this inquest. All during this case, he has used extremely violent and unnecessary abusive language. He has shown complete recklessness in the statements he has made and has disregarded every canon of decency on his examination and cross-examination of witnesses. He has done this not for the purpose of furthering any legitimate argument in this case, but rather to spread foul and unforgivable slanders. His conduct has been unparalleled in the history of the Irish Bar. The result of his attack on Dr. Lowe and Mr. Max Green was that Dr. Lowe is practically ruined in his profession, and both he and Mr. Green are under constant police protection. I say these things with great regret, but it is my duty on behalf of my clients to state them. I would ask the jury to leave out of their minds all the frenzied, wild statements which have been made here and deal with the facts of this case. I put it to you. Do you believe that if Thomas Ashe had taken the food offered to him from the time he went into prison, that he would be dead today? He would not. The law states that when a prisoner refuses food, the jailer is obliged to preserve his life. It is, I submit, irrelevant whether artificial feeding is morally right or wrong. The law is that artificial feeding was necessary, and you, the jury, should start off with that proposition in mind. There is absolutely no doubt that there was a concerted amount of effort among all the prisoners to defy the rules at Mountjoy Prison. They were faced with what could only be called a mutiny. Mr. Healy tells us of what Thomas Ashe is supposed to have said to the Lord Mayor. Do you know what his last words were to his priest? He said, "Father, we've made a great fight, a great fight." Mr. Boland was up against very resolute and determined men. What would have been said if he had given in to that? If he had not been able to govern his own prison? He had to act. Thomas Ashe did not catch cold and did not complain of having caught cold. Much has been made of this matter, of his bed and bedding, while referring to the causes of death. But at no time did Thomas Ashe complain of being deprived of his bed and bedding. All the doctors gave their evidence openly and voluntarily, and have all agreed that the causes of death was because of heart failure following congestion of the lungs. There is not a shred of evidence, despite Mr. Healy's insinuations, that Dr. Lowe or anyone else was negligent in anything they did. Mr. Ashe seems to almost have contemplated death. I would not go as far as to say he committed suicide. Make no mistake about it. Mr. Ashe was a very determined man. He made his fight, and in doing so, he sacrificed his life. It is for you, the jury, to decide how far his own actions contributed to that. The fact is that if Thomas Ashe had taken the food offered to him, he would be alive today. He is dead because of the condition to which he brought himself, and the infirmities of nature that were not brought upon him by man, but were born with him. No one can be blamed for that.
Have the jury reached a verdict? Please step forward and address the court.
We find that the deceased, Thomas Ashe, according to the medical evidence of Professor McWheely, Sir Arthur Chase and Sir Thomas Miles, died of heart failure and congestion of the lungs on September 25th, and that his death was caused by the punishment of taking away his bed, bedding and boots, and being left to lie on a cold floor for 50 hours, and then being subjected to forcible feeding in his weak condition after a hunger strike of 5 or 6 days. We censure the castle authorities for not having acted promptly, especially when the grave condition of the deceased and other prisoners was brought to their notice on the previous Saturday by the Lord Mayor and Sir John Irwin. We find the hunger strike was adopted by the prisoners after they were being treated as criminals, after they demanded to be treated as political prisoners. We condemn forcible or mechanical feeding as an inhuman and dangerous operation and say it should be discontinued. We find that the assistant doctor who was called in, Dr. Henry Lowe, having had no previous practice in such operations, administered forcible feeding unskillfully, and that the taking away of the deceased's bed, bedding and boots was an unfeeling and barbarous act. And we censure the Deputy Governor for violating prison rules and inflicting punishment which he had no power to do so. We infer he was acting under instructions from the prison board at the castle, which refused to give evidence and documents asked for. We tender our sympathy to the relatives of the deceased in this sad and tragic occurrence.
And that was it, the evidence, the accusations, and hopefully the truth. It was a difficult task for any jury, made even more difficult by Healy's initial suggestion that these 16 men had been chosen by the police for their own ends. What their personal, political convictions were, we have no idea, but it is unlikely that there was a Republican sympathiser among them. Their verdict is now a part of our Irish history.